Okay, think for a second about names. Not just, the one in your driver's license. The names people call you. Maybe the names you even call yourself. Some lift you up, right? Others, well, not so much. Welcome to the deep dive.
Hey there. Yeah, we're the place where we really dig into sources on a topic to pull out what really matters for you.
And today, we're diving into something pretty fundamental. Names, labels, identity, how we get named, and, maybe more importantly, how we find our true name.
It's a powerful journey. We've looked at a whole range of material for this. Excerpts like "You're not weak, you're waiting to be named," and then chapters covering the whole arc, really, from facing struggles to building community right through to, well, legacy.
Yeah, a lot of ground. So this deep dive is kind of your condensed guide. We want to understand how you can move past those limiting labels, the sources call them false names.
Right, and step into who you're really meant to be, your authentic identity and purpose.
Exactly. So our mission today, let's unpack this journey. Discovering your true name, what does that actually involve?
Okay, so let's start with those false names. The source material really emphasizes how easily we pick these up, from negative stuff that happens.
Like what kind of stuff?
Well, think about failures, rejection, maybe systemic pressures, trauma. All of these things can kind of slap a label on you, and we just start answering to it.
Yeah, I can see that. And the sources give specific examples, right? Like weak.
Exactly. Weak. Maybe that comes from, I don't know, missing an opportunity, feeling rejected, or just times you retreated instead of pushing through. It sinks in.
Or another one they mention is fake, which is interesting.
Yeah, fake is a big one. It can happen even when things look good on the outside, You've got the success, maybe the family, but inside, it feels hollow, like you're just acting.
That gap between the public image and the private feeling.
Precisely, and that gap fosters this feeling of being, well, a fraud, a fake.
So these names, weak, fake, whatever they might be
Hmm.
for someone, they feel like verdicts, don't they? Like, this is just who I am.
They do. But here's the twist the sources offer. They say these aren't final verdicts. They're actually invitations
Invitations.
to a kind of rebirth. The core idea is, look, living under these false names isn't usually because you're fundamentally flawed. Often it's because you haven't been properly named by someone with the real authority to do it.
Okay, proper naming. This leads us into the biblical side of things, right?
Yeah.
Divine name-giving.
Yeah. And this is crucial. In the Bible, when God renames someone, it's way more than just a new label. It's presented as like a recreation. It actually
Totally.
changes reality.
So not just a nickname, it's like speaking potential into existence.
Exactly. The name itself has creative power.
Could you give us an example from the sources?
Sure. Think Abram, right? He's called a wandering Aramean, no kids, faith's a bit shaky.
Yeah.
And God renames him Abraham, father of many nations. The sources stress this wasn't just symbolic. That name carried the actual creative force to make it happen, even though it looked impossible.
Wow. Okay, what about Jacob? His name wasn't exactly flattering either.
Go. No, heel, grabber, deceiver, pretty much. But then he has that intense wrestling match, right?
By the river. Yeah.
And afterwards, boom, new name, Israel. One who struggles with God and humans and overcomes. It didn't just describe the struggle, it fundamentally changed his identity, his destiny. The deceiver becomes the overcomer.
Through that authorized naming.
Exactly. And then there's Simon, impulsive fisherman.
Becomes Peter.
Yeah.
The rock. Even though, as the sources point out, he was hardly rock solid at the time.
Not at all. Still impulsive, emotional, definitely a work in progress. But Jesus names him for who he will be, his future function. The naming itself starts the transformation.
So the pattern is divine naming creates what's going to be, not just what is.
Precisely. It even goes back to Genesis. God speaks light, and light is. He names things into existence.
Okay, so connecting this back.
Yeah.
Why do those false names often feel so wrong, so off deep down?
Well, the idea is that our deeper self, our spirit, it sort of knows they're counterfeit. Even if our mind has accepted them over the years, there's this nagging sense that this isn't the real story.
Which brings us back to authority. If God's naming has this creative power, who actually holds that authority for us?
The sources are clear. Biblically, it's God the Father. His naming, confirmed through Christ, empowered by the Spirit, has that power because he knows us completely. Like Jeremiah 1.5, right? Before I formed you, I knew you.
So God's perspective is totally different from ours. He's not just seeing the mess-ups.
Not at all. He sees the whole picture, origin, present, purpose. He names us according to his intention for us, not just our current state. He sees how his image is meant to shine through us uniquely. beyond the flaws.
And interestingly, the sources really stress relationship here. This isn't a solo mission.
No, absolutely not. That's critical. Real identity discovery happens in community. True names need to be spoken, affirmed by others who see us truthfully, for them to really land in our hearts. Isolation keeps those false names alive.
So spiritual fathers, mentors, what the sources call authentic brothers, they play a huge role.
A massive role. These kinds of covenant relationships are where transformation often happens. When someone you trust, someone with spiritual insight, looks at you and says, "Hey, I see this in you. You're not weak. You're a warrior."
They can really cut through the noise.
It can awaken something profound.
Yeah.
Those words, rooted in truth, help us start to believe and actually live into our real identity.
Okay, so we want to move towards this true name. It sounds like we need to actively prepare. We can't just wait passively.
Definitely not. The sources lay out a few key things. First, you got to expose the counterfeits. Acknowledge them.
Like, name the false names.
Yeah, bring them into the light. What labels have you accepted? What echoes in your head when you fail? What identity do you grab onto when you feel rejected? It's like doing an inventory.
Makes sense.
Second, intentionally get into that truthful community. Find those authentic brothers, those mentors. And third, cultivate a real expectation. Be open to actually hearing from God, to recognizing your true name.
And the sources make this really interesting, almost counterintuitive point. The true name is often linked to our deepest wound.
Yeah, isn't that powerful? The very area where you've felt the most attacked, the biggest struggle. That might actually be pointing right at your greatest potential. The battlefield could be the birthplace of your victory.
Wow. Okay, so we do the prep work. What does the actual moment of naming look like? Is it always dramatic?
Usually not. According to the sources, it's often more of a process. A gradual revelation may be confirmed over time.
How so?
It might start as a quiet whisper inside, Then maybe a mentor speaks something that resonates. Circumstances might line up. It builds into this inner conviction, this knowing, this is who I am.
And how do you know it's the true name? What are the characteristics?
Okay, 3 key things. 1, it resonates deep down. Feels like coming home, not like putting on a costume.
Okay.
2, it energizes you. It gives life, unlocks spiritual resources, rather than draining you like the false names do.
Right.
And 3, it equips you for action, for purpose. Your true identity isn't just for you. It points outward toward your mission, your function.
Like Peter stepping into leadership once he grasped the rock.
Exactly. That's the connection.
So getting the name, that's really just the beginning, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's crucial. Receiving it is the start. Then you have to live it, embody it, daily choices, relationships, mission. It takes commitment, covenant commitment.
Because the old patterns don't just disappear overnight.
Not a chance. You need deliberate practice to counter those ingrained habits tied to the old false identities.
Which leads us perfectly into this framework the sources introduce. The burn system. What is that exactly?
Right, the burn system. It's presented as this structured, almost ancient pattern for discovering authentic identity. 4 phases: break, undergo, rename, and nail.
B-U-R-N. Okay.
Yeah.
And the idea is that feeling numb or stuck isn't failure, it's an invitation to this.
Exactly. An invitation into the fire, so to speak.
So let's walk through it. Phase 1, break. What happens there?
Right, yeah. That's typically the first 10 days. It's all about shattering secrecy, radical honesty. Through things like journaling honestly, fasting from comforts, things you use to numb out, and critically, confession within a small, trusted group, a fire circle, exposing the shame, the hidden stuff. It's about breaking down the scar tissue so real healing can happen.
Okay, creating friction to get to the truth. Then what?
Phase 2 is undergo, days 11 to 20. This is about embracing trial, the wilderness.
What does that mean, practically?
It means facing those hard things, loneliness, addiction struggles, distractions, meaninglessness, relationship chaos, not as punishment, but as preparation. Learning to stay present in the discomfort, reframing suffering as something that forges authority.
Shifting perspective on hardship. Got it. Phase 3.
Phase 3, rename, days 21 to 30. This is where, building on the first 2 phases, you actively seek and receive that authentic identity.
The divine encounter moment.
Often, yeah. Rejecting the false labels consciously, proclaiming the true name, and like we said, it often connects back to that core wound.
Okay. And the final phase? Nail.
Nail. Days 31 to 40. This is all about sealing the deal, making it stick.
How? Through tangible things.
Exactly. Visible actions, covenant rituals you design, maybe wearable markers, symbolic scars even, public declarations. Accountability structures, it's about moving beyond just feelings to real binding commitment, making the internal shift external.
So a really intensive 40-day process.
Yeah.
But what about day 41? Then now what?
Yeah, crucial question. The sources are clear. The morning after a big transformation push is dangerous. The pullback to old ways is strong.
So intensity isn't enough for the long haul.
Nope. Sustained change needs ongoing rhythms.
What kind of rhythms?
They talk about a trinity of sustainable fire. First, a rhythm of reflection, strategic journaling, examining your inner world regularly.
Okay.
Second, a rhythm of rest, a real Sabbath. Not just stopping work, but intentionally resisting the productivity, the value mindset. It's a command, they stress, not a suggestion.
Important distinction. And the third?
Third, a rhythm of relationship, that covenant brotherhood. Absolutely essential to fight isolation, provide ongoing confession, accountability, reinforcement of that new identity.
So these rhythms become the new normal. But life still happens, right? The sources say battles will return. How do we handle that? Doesn't it feel like failure?
It can feel like failure, but the sources reframe it. The return of battles isn't weakness. It's actually confirmation you're now strong enough to be a target. You're a threat now.
Yeah.
Experiencing resistance to sin, actually struggling where you used to just give in easily, that's proof of change.
So it's evidence, not failure. What about relying on feelings during those battles?
Yeah, the sources warn against that.
Yeah.
Emotion-based identity is shaky. One bad day and you feel like you lost everything. Covenant-based identity, anchored in God's declaration about you, that stays constant, regardless of feelings.
So how do we prepare practically for those returning fights?
Develop tactical protocols, predetermined responses for your specific weak spots.
Like a game plan.
Exactly. Simple, specific, spiritually grounded, connected to your brothers, and designed to break the temptation cycle before it gets going. They give a really clear example for something like porn temptation. Plan it out beforehand.
Makes sense. Have the escape route planned. And brotherhood comes back in here. Brotherhood under fire.
Big time. Your brothers are your tactical partners. Constant communication, covering fire when someone's struggling, never leaving a guy behind if he falls. It requires real protocols for check-ins, support, restoration, even learning from mistakes together.
Which leads right into from burn to brother.
Hmm.
Building this kind of deep relationship. What are the essentials?
Okay, 4 big ones the sources highlight. 1, covenant, not convenience. This is sacred, costly. Requires priority, sacrifice, showing up, not just when it fits your schedule.
Like a real commitment.
Totally. 2, challenge, not just comfort. Loving wounds from a friend, right? Pushing each other toward that true identity. Iron sharpening iron.
Sometimes uncomfortable, but necessary.
Definitely. 3, confession, not concealment. Creating that safe space for regular, honest sharing of struggles, doubts, fears. No drama, just truth.
Yeah.
And 4, constancy, not chaos. Reliable rhythms, showing up for each other consistently, regardless of mood or circumstances.
Okay, so how do you actually find these guys, these fire circle brothers?
Look for guys with spiritual hunger, who aren't afraid of truth, who are committed to their own journey, and who are reliable. Then it's about intentional invitation, casting vision, maybe a trial period, and then a formal covenant ceremony.
Yeah.
Making real commitments.
Sounds very intentional, not just falling into friendships.
Very intentional. And the purpose isn't just mutual support, right? It's bigger.
What's the bigger purpose?
Glorifying God, being a witness, preparing for spiritual fatherhood, and advancing the kingdom together. More effective together than alone.
Okay, spiritual fatherhood. That's the next step they talk about in Called to Forge Others. What does that involve?
It's the invitation, after going through the fire yourself, to guide others, sharing your real story, the raw parts included, walking them through the burn-in process, establishing those covenant monuments, visible signs of change.
But there are warnings too, pitfalls.
Oh yeah, big ones. Don't create dependency. Avoid inappropriate affection or authority grabs. Remember, God does the transforming, not you. And the goal is multiplication sons become fathers.
Passing it on. This connects back to naming, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Naming and mission.
Absolutely. Your true name isn't just who you are. It contains the seeds of what you're for. It's verdict and vision.
So identity and calling are intertwined.
Seamlessly. You can't really separate them without getting off track like the sources say the Pharisees did. Your name carries embedded instructions, like divine DNA. Commissioning happens with naming.
How do we figure out the specifics of that mission then?
One tool the sources suggest is the burden barometer. What breaks your heart? What specific situation in the world or the church causes you real anguish?
That burden might be pointing to your assignment.
Often, yeah, like Nehemiah seeing Jerusalem's walls, that burden aligns with your naming. But activating it takes courage, real firmness, chazak ve'ematz, as they put it. It takes specificity, clarity on who, where, how, and it definitely takes sacrifice, counting the cost.
This sounds intense, all-consuming almost.
Uh.
Which brings us to sacred obsession.
Yeah, it's a contrast to, lukewarm faith. Sacred obsession is this holy fire that consumes, focuses, and endures.
But how is that different from just like burnout, kingdom hustle?
Great question. The sources differentiate clearly. Sacred obsession flows from love and settled worth, not fear and trying to earn value. It's internally validated, restorative, even in effort, secure, fulfilling. Hustle is often the opposite, depleting, insecure, resentful. God wants deep surrender, not just frantic activity.
So how do we cultivate that healthy sacred fire?
They list practices: morning consecration before strategy, fasting from numbing things, scripture immersion for revelation, brotherhood check-ins, dedicating work as worship, real Sabbath surrender, regularly meditating on your mission. These seem like anchors for that fire. And it's not just for us, is it? There's this idea of legacy, sons yet unseen.
Right. True legacy isn't just about bloodlines or money. It's transmitting conviction, character, calling. It's spiritual fatherhood in action.
Like Moses and Joshua, Elijah and Elisha.
Exactly. It requires intentional selection, deep life-on-life investment, customized development for the person, testing, and then releasing them into their own calling. You pass on values, decision-making frameworks, relational patterns, spiritual disciplines.
Creating a multi-generational ripple effect.
That's the goal. So your sons can become fathers who raise sons, extending the impact far beyond your own reach.
Which brings us to the end point, this powerful capstone. The warrior's benediction. What is that?
It's the act of public declaration, sealing the transformation. Ancient cultures understood words create worlds, right? This taps into that.
So it's not just a private thing.
No, you craft your benediction. Your true name revealed through the breaking, the mission that burns in you, the specific covenant commitments you're making, and then you declare it publicly. Why public?
It fights self-deception, creates accountability, marks a sacred threshold. It shifts you from living toward transformation to living from it, from performance to presence, from fear to freedom.
You declare who you are now as a covenant warrior.
Precisely. And you live from that declaration daily, reciting it, being held accountable by brothers, having visible reminders, responding decisively to compromise. It turns past pain into future purpose.
Wow. Okay, so this whole journey, recognizing false names, understanding divine naming, going through the burn system break, undergo, rename, nail.
Sustaining it with rhythms, navigating the returning battles with brothers.
Embracing spiritual fatherhood, connecting naming to mission, living with sacred obsession, building legacy, and sealing it with that warrior's benediction. It really is a firewalk.
It absolutely is. It takes intention, community, covenant.
So as you, our listener, reflect on all this, maybe take a moment. Think about your own names, the ones you've carried. Are they true?
Yeah. And what are the burdens that stir something in you? What might they be pointing towards? What's the very next step for you on this journey toward a fire-forged identity and purpose? Because the fire, it really doesn't have to die out. It's waiting to be ignited and then passed on.